Hi there, this is Christina Hogue again, and with a bonus episode on something that I find a lot of beginning writers have trouble with until they learn just a few little tricks, and that's dialogue. Dialogue actually is more complicated than simply writing down what we say. Dialogue in books, whether nonfiction or fiction, a memoir, and even movies and television, has to accomplish a goal, and that usually is either revealing plot, character, or sense of time and place. So, with that in mind, here are a couple things that I find people get wrong a lot. Number one is you have to make your dialogue unique to your character who's speaking. And that means only that person can say what they're going to say. If I have one character, for example, in a novel who likes to speak in exclamation points. So his voice kind of goes up at the end, and he's always like very emphatic. So I use exclamation points with that. And I have another character commenting about that saying, he always spoke like in exclamation points. So these are the kind of things, like little differences, that you need to do to differentiate your characters, especially if you have two points of view, for example, and you need to find different ways to distinguish those characters. Otherwise, they sound much the same. And it's very annoying to me when I pick up a book and there's two different points of view from chapter to chapter, say, but the person speaking, the character's point of view, sounds exactly the same. So there are subtle differences that you have to find to differentiate your characters. Another thing is we don't use filler words when we write down dialogue. In real life, we use a lot of things like, oh, well, yeah, hi, thanks, and even phrases like nice to meet you, yeah, have a nice day, all of those kind of things. Now, in real life, we fill that in. I mean, it's nothing. But on the written page, it really jumps out at the reader, and it's very tedious to read. You know, when you speak, the words just kind of dissolve into the air. But when they're on the page, you can actually go back and count how many ums, ahs, and filler words, and it's not to say that you should use them not at all, but use them sparingly, just every once in a while, when it really is something that a character would say, well, blah, blah, blah. So, and I see that a lot, very often. This also goes into, situations where you have, say, two characters meeting each other. And I edited a memoir manuscript recently that was filled with this. And it was always when something like this, hi, nice to meet you. Yeah, nice to meet you too. This is super boring dialogue because it doesn't accomplish anything of those three goals. It doesn't reveal character, doesn't move the plot forward, nor does it reveal time or place. And you can easily get around that situation by simply saying the characters, Joe and John, introduced each other, or something, and then go into the meat of the conversation, which is going to reveal character or time or place or the plot. So weed out all those little filler things. Thanks, you're welcome. These things that in regular life we say because it's polite to say that, but in a book you usually don't need to say that stuff. The other thing is that dialogue puts the reader in the immediate scene. It takes out that narrator voice. So that's a good place to show place, a sense of place and time. And that's when you have characters interacting with your scene. For example, Joe said, lying on the couch, things like that give you, again, fill out the place, the setting in the reader's mind. Another tendency I see beginning writers do a lot is using annoying dialogue tags, or they're also called ascriptions. Those are the things that come after the line of dialogue that say, he said, or she said, he asked. People tend to put in thinking they have to vary the verbs to say. So they put in other words such as declared, observed, stated, remarked, commented. These are really heavy words that kind of stand out in your dialogue. You just want to go with said. And yes, it's very repetitive, and repetition is not a good thing to have in a piece of writing, with the exception of said, because it's almost invisible. The reader just sort of reads the line, he said. Joe wanted to go to the beach, he said. You barely even notice it. So that in turn emphasizes what is being said rather than the way somebody's saying it. Which comes to the other point, is that when people use adverbs, he said sarcastically, she said bitingly, he said confidently, she said reassuringly. Again, you shouldn't need the adverb if the line of your dialogue is strong enough. If you have to put that line at that adverb, that description, it means your dialogue isn't carrying the weight of what is being said. It's not carrying that weight of emotion. So you have to go back and make sure that you really have a pithy line of dialogue that the reader can then infer the emotion behind it. Now, again, some writers use a lot of these. They seem to get away with it. J.K. Rowling is one of them. And I notice British writers in general use a lot more adverbs. But American writers, it is basically considered bad form to use a lot of adverbs. So only use them when really necessary and try and weed them out pretty much all the time. I would say that's the rule of thumb. The other thing I see people doing is using people's names in dialogue. Now, when you have two people speaking together, they generally know who they're speaking to, so you don't have to say their name all the time. I love you, Joe. I love you, Edith. Let's go out, Joe. Okay, Edith, let's do this. It gets really tedious when you have to read a lot of the people's names in dialogue. So again, unless it's really necessary, leave out people's names. And the other thing is, but you have to remember, if you have two people talking together and you're just going very short, punchy dialogue, a line A, B, A, B, A, B, you may want to throw in a name or at least a dialogue tag to let the reader know who's talking. That's another thing, that sometimes you get lost if you have a long page of dialogue and it's two people talking back and forth. While it's clear it's clearly who's talking when, sometimes it's very easy for the reader to get lost. So don't make the reader work that hard. Go back and just throw in a dialogue tag, he said, she said, or an action. She brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. Then we know it's whoever the woman is speaking. So these are just a few little tips on dialogue that hopefully will help you as you edit your piece. This has been a bonus episode to Writing Your Memoir. Thanks.